So your podcast, what is it about?
When we started, it was focused pretty much 100% on sales. Now it's more like sales, marketing, leadership.
Tell me, when have you really noticed that it started reshaping your brand or brand started increasing brand awareness? Because a lot of podcasters lose faith.
You know, I did 20 episodes and nobody
Nothing is happening.
Yeah, nothing's happening, and I say, yeah, try doing 200.
Chris Williamson with Modern Wisdom podcast, Stephen Bartlett with The Diary of the CEO. They both said that 2 to 3 years were not pretty much no one gave a damn.
The only way you're going to build one is to produce quality content over a long period of time. So if you're not prepared to do it for the long haul, then I would say don't do it.
Hey everybody, this is Sergey and Be Yourself Podcast, the podcast on expressing our true selves. Today I'm joined by John Golden, who is a strategist, best-selling author, speaker, a podcaster, and the Chief and Strategy and Marketing Officer at Pipeliner CRM. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Sergey. Great to be here.
Yeah. So first question I always ask my guests. So where are you now? What's the weather like?
Oh yeah, I'm based in San Diego on the west coast of the U.S. Today the weather's beautiful. It's normally pretty nice in San Diego, to be honest. I mean, we've had a little bit of rain lately, but generally speaking, it's pretty much always sunny in San Diego.
Oh my God, you're spoiled, John.
Yeah, very much so.
All right. So as usual, I'm just going to outline what we're going to talk today with John. We're going to talk about how John has found his unique path in life, how his company, Pipeliner CRM, is setting itself apart from the competition. And in the end, we're going to talk about the value of podcasting, because John is a podcast host. He's got a successful show about sales, yeah. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Cool. So tell me, how were you able to get to the job that you really love? Was it a frictionless road, or you did have some pivots and career changes?
Yeah, no, it was definitely not a frictionless road. That's for sure. I think it's, let me step back for a second. I always envy those people who kind of know what career they want. They go to college to do law, or they do medicine or whatever, or engineering. And they're like, I wasn't one of those people. And I never really knew what I wanted to do, or to be honest, I never really even knew what I was good at. And, so I did a number of different things, but it changed when I grew up in Ireland, and I grew up during unfortunately, the times when Ireland was in pretty bad shape and recessions, jobs were hard to come by. But I got my break when I joined a company that was operating in the .com space, and in the early mid-90s, I got the opportunity during the mid-90s to move to Silicon Valley. And to take on a role that was really, I wasn't a programmer, so I wasn't a technologist, but I discovered that I liked technology, but in a way of, I liked what technology could do. I liked figuring out how it could help people, not so much coding, not like getting into the weeds of that, but figuring out how it could be applied. So I ended up in a kind of product marketing role. And that's kind of where I discovered that I really enjoyed and liked bringing ideas to the market and explaining and helping people understand how things could impact their businesses. So from there, I kind of progressed from working there, from doing kind of product marketing. I then ran a products and programs organization at another company in New Horizons. And I moved to a startup where we were selling into the K-12, which is the education space.
Was it before or after the bubble?
Oh, I arrived in Silicon Valley during the bubble. So
Okay.
I was there for the good times, and then I was there for the implosion when everything went south. And literally it went from, I'll just give you my abiding memory, Sergey, is that when I was first there, it would take you an hour. I lived up in the city, up in San Francisco, and it would take you nearly an hour and a half to commute down to Redwood City, where we were based. And the 101, the freeway goes by San Francisco Airport, bumper to bumper every day, like really, really busy. And as you're driving along, it used to be fun because you'd look at the office buildings along the route and you would see, oh, there's a new .com. Oh, there's a new .com. And the car parks were full, and they were full of, at the time, the BMW Z3s were big among programmers because they were giving them free. Like,
Wow.
oh, come join my company, and you'll, as a programmer, and
Really?
I'll give
What
you
a tale.
yeah. And so that was really exciting, but there was always something kind of that didn't really make sense about it. So, and there was this whole idea of like, oh, business rules, the old business rules don't matter anymore. Don't care about being profitable. Don't worry about the cost side of it. Just like throw loads of money in, go on the NAS, float on the NASDAQ, make lots of money on paper. And then obviously, of course, it turned out that, of course, business fundamentals mattered.
Yeah.
And then we had the implosion. So my abiding memory, Sergey, is from being bumper to bumper traffic, watching all these new .coms up, to suddenly being able to get to work in about 30 to 40 minutes. Freeway is empty of traffic. The signs start coming down off the buildings. Car parks are emptying. And it was such a weird experience to see something go from being so full on to almost like overnight. It felt like overnight, as you'd see these signs coming down and the car parks emptying, and suddenly it's really easy to get to work. And so it was a great reminder again of how that old saying, if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is.
Yeah. Well, this is what Nassim Taleb calls a black swan, an unpredictable event that can turn things around. And, for me in my country, I'm in Kiev in Ukraine, the war has become this huge swan that, everyone had to reckon with, But after that happened in San Francisco, what were your steps, and what did you do next?
Yeah, so I had the choice. I had the choice about going back home, but I liked America. I liked the fact that the opportunities that you could have in America that I would never have had in Ireland, and that if you were prepared at the time, if you were prepared to move, you could always find a great opportunity. And that's really what I discovered early on. And, I also ended up meeting a California girl and getting married. So that, that made my visa situation a lot easier then, because I could transition straight into, but as I said, my next step was, I moved down to Orange County. I joined New Horizons computer learning, and I had my first executive level job. So I moved from being kind of mid-level to actually being on an executive team. And that was its own learning experience and challenge, because this is the first time like I had a real because here's the other thing. During the .com era, we weren't running budgets. We were just spending money. It was literally, you wanted money, you spent it. Yeah. Then I transitioned into running a business unit properly, having a budget, having to justify everything, having to generate X amount of revenue for my business unit, and it was a challenge because I took over the e-learning part of it, where we were bringing e-learning products to the learning centers. And the learning centers, it was a franchise model. I was at the franchisor, and the franchisees were physical computer training centers. And they made the most money by getting people to come in and do in-person training. So as things were moving to a more to online and e-learning and stuff, they were very, very slow to want to move to that direction because the economics just didn't seem the same to them. And also, you know, they had the physical overhead of the buildings. So that was my first experience really of really difficult selling something to people who were very resistant to it. And even if you thought you had all the arguments, and all the arguments were logical, which they were, it was the first time I realized that it's not just having logical arguments. You also have to understand the emotion behind the buyer, right?
Yeah, and behind the objections.
Yeah, and in this case, it was the person who'd maybe put all of their life savings into purchasing one of these franchises and buying a building or renting a building, hiring people, investing in equipment and all of that. And now you're telling them, yeah, but that's not the future. The future is you're going to have to move some of your business online. And it doesn't matter, as I said, it doesn't matter how well thought out your arguments were, how logical they were. Like I said, this was the first time coming up against an emotional reaction where somebody just doesn't want to hear those arguments or doesn't want to accept them because they were doing well in the old model and they didn't want to change. Even though the market was changing, circumstances were changing. It's like, I always loved that Jack Welch, that former CEO of GE. He always said, my favorite quote is, you know, face reality as it is, not as it was or how you would like it to be. And I carried that with me because that was a situation where people were trying to stay in, they weren't facing reality. They were trying to stay where it used to be. That was it, as opposed to saying, okay, things have changed. And I carried that through with me, but it taught me a great lesson is that when you're selling or when you're bringing a product to market or a service to market is you have to understand that it's not just about what it can do for people. There's also an emotional component built into it that you have to understand on behalf of the buyer. Therefore, it's not always just logic and here's 5 good reasons why you should do this. You also have to help somebody maybe come on a journey with you and realize that, yes, I have to make changes now, even though ideally I don't want to.
Yeah, people want to resist change because changing is probably the most difficult part of our journey. Yeah. We want to, as you said, and I can testify to this, that it's great. I mean, I cannot testify to this from my own experience, but I can see the Michael Jordans of the world. I can see, all the people who knew from the early going what they were going to do in life. And when you're in your 30s or your late 20s and you need to change the direction of your career altogether, could be a huge stress. So was that time when you faced these emotional reactions, your first introduction to the world of sales?
Or just in general, because I think there's two parts. It's my introduction to even working in corporate America, so it was transitioning because the company I had originally moved over to the States with was Irish. It had the part that was in Silicon Valley and stuff was more American than it was Irish. But the company was fundamentally Irish. So moving on to New Horizons and then to the other places I went afterwards was moving into corporate America and just understanding how to navigate internally as much externally. So, and this is why it's funny when people say, oh, like I would never want to be a salesperson or I don't want to be in sales or whatever. And you say, well, it doesn't matter what job you're actually doing. You are in sales to some
You are
degree.
in sales already. Yeah.
And a lot of it is selling internally. And that is one of the hardest things to do, is to sell internally. You have to persuade other people in other departments of the organization to support you in your ideas, or maybe to come along with you on a journey, or maybe to make changes. And I think that's one of the things, Sergey, that I discovered about myself. I discovered that I tended to be a change agent in many ways, because I discovered that that was one of my greatest gifts, was the ability to see things in simple terms. And that might seem contradictory to people, but I would see people are very, very good at complicating things.
Yeah.
People are, and people are very comfortable with complication, and they're great at building out like processes and their organizations, because they build them with all these, but what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if the other, then I need to, instead of going, well, why don't we just build it to the simplest and most straightforward scenario, and then just deal with things as they come up, right? Just deal with the exceptions. And so I discovered that I was very good at sort of seeing where there was a simpler way of doing things, where things that were being done were unnecessary, and you would think that maybe that's a great thing, and people would say, "Oh, fantastic, we have somebody like this," but it's not. It's quite the opposite. You become quite disruptive in many ways, because people are very comfortable with the status quo or the way they're doing things right now. Can
you give me an example of how you simplified things, something that was already set in stone and that people didn't like? Some real life example.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one example. I joined this organization. It was a real estate mortgage bankers association, and and I took over the education wing, which was a for-profit part that generated real revenue. And I looked at how we were delivering a lot of the educational programs that we were delivering, and they weren't consistent. They weren't like properly formulated. They were left a lot of times to the instructor, how they wanted to do things. So I said, well, why don't we standardize this? Therefore, it's easier to deliver. We can have more people deliver it. And, so, and that seemed to me like a very simple, non-controversial thing to do, right? However, it caused a lot of issues, because some of the people who were doing it didn't want to do it that way. They wanted to do it their own way. They liked the way they did it. And also when I started saying, we could save money because we don't need to have this bit, and we don't need to give out this, and we don't need that. And then people would like, we don't need to have a dinner. What was that? Why do we have a dinner the night before that we pay for? Right? We bring these people to it, and then, they used to have all these kind of things. And I started to say that they don't make any sense to me. But people will get back to emotion. People were emotionally attached to these things, rather than looking at it from a business point of view. So things like that, I discovered that what sometimes you think it's like, this makes complete sense, and you're really excited, and you're saying, look, and we can actually make more money because we're wasting a lot of money on these things. And then you roll it out and people go, no, I don't want that. I don't want to do it. We like the way we do it. And then I had people I had people who, refused then to take part in it, and started complaining to the chairman of the board or whatever, because I was forcing them to do a standard program as opposed to do it the way they wanted to do it, or the way they'd always done it. And that was my first introduction to, also, I think, understanding that you think that people, when they're in business, and some of these were very successful. I mean, I remember one gentleman, a really, really successful real estate attorney. And then I'm like, you're acting like a child. What's going on here? Yeah. And I guess that was a difficult introduction for me to the fact that, again, it comes back to, it doesn't matter how successful, it doesn't matter how good somebody is, or what. Emotion takes over. When emotion takes over, logic goes out the window. And that's what you have to be prepared for. You have to be prepared for the emotional response. because you can, as I said, you can lay out something as logically as possible. It can make complete sense to you. But if you don't factor in the emotional reaction that it may be going to get, then you're going to end up in that situation where you have people who are resisting you, and they're not resisting you for good reason. They're resisting you out of emotion. And that really is a difficult learning process.
One of my favorite quotes is by Picasso, where he says that the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to share this gift with others. And you're saying that, and I can really resonate with what you're saying, that a lot of things, or maybe all the things in life are too complicated. And usually people like you, and for this matter, like me, who come and try to simplify everything and make it easier for everybody, not only for ourselves, but for everybody, we face resistance, not because there is a proper reason, but because, as you said, people are emotionally attached to something, or they don't want to go through a change. So, and I think that this knowledge that you just outlined, you already incorporated it inside of your current business and solution. So maybe you can tell us more about the Pipeline CRM and how it is, I'm quoting, standing at the forefront of AI-driven sales technology.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I came to Pipeliner. I'd been running a couple of businesses for a parent company. One was Huthwaite. It was spin selling, so sales. It was a sales consultancy, and we helped companies implement spin selling and some other sales programs with large global companies across the world. Very successful. Mm-hmm. And when the companies got sold to a private equity, I moved on, and I thought, okay, I'll do my own management consult. I'll take all the things I've learned, and I'll do my own management consultancy. And I was then contacted by Nicholas Kimla, who is the founder and CEO of Pipeliner. He had just left Austria and moved the business to the States. And he contacted me because I'd written a book while I was at Huthwaite, Winning the Battle for Sales.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And in that book, I just taken the tried and true sales methodologies, but I had combined each one with a lesson from history, right? Sometimes famous battles, sometimes obscure things. Sometimes the connections were a little tenuous, but the whole idea was to make it easy to remember a sales lesson because you could relate it to some event. And one of the chapters was actually on CRM. And I was using the analogy of the David and Goliath, because when I researched the story, and the guy who was helping me research the story, I realized there's a little bit before David goes up against Goliath. And that is that the king offered David all of the latest technology, right? The latest armor, weapons, and all of this. And he tried all this stuff, and then he went like, I can't move. This stuff is too heavy. It's going to weigh me down. It's not effective. So he cast aside all this new stuff, and he went out with his slingshot and took down the Goliath, as we know from the story. So I compared CRM to that because it had been my experience when we were doing sales methodology consulting was that CRM didn't help salespeople. It was hard to use. You couldn't really embed methodology into the existing CRMs. It was almost impossible to do. And if you couldn't embed methodology, then you couldn't reinforce it on a daily basis in terms of work practice, right? So, you were trying to implement a methodology in how you sell, but then you're going into your CRM, which is set up differently, and the two were never connected. So Nicholas reached out to me and he said, I read your book, and he goes, your chapter on CRM, I want to prove you wrong. And I said, okay, knock yourself out.
How did he find you? Did he just find the book?
LinkedIn. He found the book and then reached out to me on LinkedIn.
Wow, this is so fascinating.
Yeah.
How writing your thoughts somewhere can lead to great opportunities in life.
100%. Absolutely. And so he reached out to me and he said, I want to prove you wrong. And I said, okay, knock yourself out. And so he showed me Pipeliner. And this is like going back 10 years now, 11 years now. So even at that point, he showed me something. And I had only really one criteria. I wanted to say, okay, if I want to set up my sales methodology and my sales process in there, how easy is it for me to do that? And he showed me, he said, it's very easy. Look. And I was like, well, it does look easy, actually. And then I noticed another thing. And I said, this looks very different to what I'm used to. And I'd use Salesforce and Siebel and some other systems in the past. I said, and he said, yes, it's I take a visual first approach because I'm building this from a salesperson's point of view. So rather than from a management point of view, I'm trying to build it so that it brings value to the salesperson. And salespeople are visual people. So I'm trying to build a system where it's very visual, very easy to use, very easy for them to interact with. Therefore, they're more likely to use it. And so I said, okay, so we did a couple of projects together. And then after a few projects, he said, oh, come on board and help me bring this to market. And I said, okay, yeah, it'd be nice. I'd been out of kind of technology for a while. I thought it'd be nice to get back into technology and also bring all the sales and marketing experience as well. And so that is what we have been building over the years. And we've been consistently growing year on year. But what we've done differently, Sergey, from other companies is, number one, we focused on the product for the last 10 years. We never spent a lot of money on marketing or branding or anything like that. And we focused on making the product to be the best it could be, but always from the point of view of, does it bring value to salespeople? When salespeople use this, does it help them? Rather than, does it just help management get what they want? Because our philosophy is that if salespeople see value in it and if they use it, then management get what they want anyway. Because what's the biggest,
sooner or later? Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest complaint? Management say, the people aren't using the system, therefore I can't get therefore the data is not correct, therefore the reports I run are inaccurate. You say, okay, flip it on its head. Get the people, have a system where people use it and they want to use it. Therefore now they're putting in the data because they want to, not because you want them to, but because they want to. Yeah. And so that's what really changed things. And then
that's a game changer, man. Because when the bare thought that you should sell something to salespeople, it's already, immediately a tough bargain. But as you say, you don't need to sell anything. The product speaks for itself. And you made salespeople your best advocates.
Yeah.
Is it so easy to use? What is the secret sauce?
The secret sauce is thinking like a salesperson when you're building it, and making it visual. And then now you mentioned AI. I mean, we started adopting AI many years ago. We did it first on our mobile application, and then obviously this new wave of AI. Instead of just throwing AI everywhere, what we said was, okay, how can we make life easier for the salesperson immediately? So immediately we brought in things like the AI assistant for writing emails, for replying, for scheduling. Then we developed it further so they can read sentiment, and everything we do with AI now is geared towards taking away the stuff that salespeople either aren't good at or it's a waste of their time, and actually giving them the opportunity to do what salespeople really want to do. The best salespeople really want to build relationships. They want to be creative. They want to, they want to bring value to their customers. They don't want to spend their time doing data entry or researching or this or that. And so we have implemented lots of AI into our system to take away all of that, to automate processes so that they don't have to do it, to get the data into the system, to allow them to focus on the high value activities. And I think that's the key now, is that we're not just allowing, we're that's the wrong word. I'm thinking is we're enabling, if you like, we're enabling salespeople to focus on being their best, to focus on doing the things that really they want to do that bring value, and to get rid of all these other activities that are important but are not the best use of a salesperson's time. And I think and it's also, we're really trying to encourage people to understand that sales is such an important role in society. I mean, look at, as you said at the beginning, Sergey, I mean, you're in Ukraine right now. I mean, when countries are at war, I mean, they're not trading together. They're not peacefully exchanging goods and ideas. How could they? Because they're in conflict. And we see it the same way, that if salespeople can be peacemakers, because if you're having a fair, and we call it win together, if you're selling to somebody and you're presenting a great product or service at a fair price, and the person you're selling to sees the value in it, sees how it's going to help them, says, okay, and you agree that there's a fair price, and both of you are looking not just for as a salesperson, I'm not just looking for a sale, I'm looking for a relationship, right?
Yes.
And you as a buyer, I'm not looking for a vendor, I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for somebody who I can trust. When you both come in with that attitude, that kind of win together, then it kind of changes the whole dynamic. And that's where we really focus on, is trying to elevate salespeople and help salespeople understand the important role that they play in society, and then also educate people out there not to see salespeople as how they've been portrayed in popular culture, but to see them as these are people who come with solutions. These are people who come with ideas to help you and bring their experiences, and that it's a wonderful thing. So that's why we have very much focused on trying to help, as I said, enable salespeople to be able to do that part of the job, because for so long they've been pushed down, and they've been made to be data entry people and do all of this other stuff, and they're sitting there going, well, when do I get to be what I want to be?
So, per your estimation, what are the jobs in the world of sales that will undoubtedly become obsolete with the rise of AI?
Mm-hmm. I think I don't like to use I think more of the entry level positions, maybe more of the SDR, the sales development reps, the ones who take the initial phone calls,
lead generation.
We've already seen some AI that's come out where it's where the AI can make phone calls on your behalf and sound like a human.
I heard this, and it still sounds strange because they take a little bit of a prolonged pause, and it sounds a bit odd. But I think it's getting there, that you won't be able to sort of recognize it.
Yeah. And then I think intelligent AI agents are going to be able to do a lot of that pre-sales work as well, where it will actually do it better, because it'll do it better because it will be able to learn as it goes, and it'll have access to all this information, and it'll be able to select the right information at the right time in a way that a human really can't. I mean, we have limits to what we can, the amount of information that we can retain or that we can communicate at a particular time. So I think intelligent AI agents, I think the initial qualification, the lead generation, a lot of that stuff I think can be handled by AI. And again, what I think that leaves this great opportunity then, because what AI isn't going to be able to do is it's not going to be able to be as creative as a human being can be. It's not going to be able to understand you as a human being in the way I can. It's not going to be able to replicate that relationship. Not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe there's somebody out there going, haha, John, you're wrong. You just wait a couple of years. But right now, I don't believe that's the case. And therefore, I think if I was to give anybody advice who's in sales now, I would say is really focus on upskilling yourself to be the best consultative salesperson you can be. Because if you just want to be more of a transactional salesperson, AI is probably going to take that from you very quickly.
Yeah. in a way, we should bring our uniqueness to the table.
Absolutely.
And in order to build relationships, we actually want to be unique. Mm-hmm. And even though if you represent one company, I mean, it does have scripts,
sure,
and the way, and maybe some buzzwords that you should throw in. But I still believe that in a corporate world, you can stand out as a salesperson, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Your CRM allows salespeople to embed their own methodology.
Yep.
So that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, and like I said, it's and it allows them to be creative, and then and as we said earlier, I always say to people is, especially in B2B sales, there is emotion involved too, because I always use this example, right? I can go across the road to Best Buy and buy the latest, greatest TV, right? The only thing that's going to happen to me is that my wife's going to be probably pretty annoyed, saying we could have spent that money on something else, right? However, in a B2B situation, if I'm purchasing a product or service for my company, it can be career enhancing or it can be career limiting, depending on how that works out. If I didn't do my due diligence properly and it turns out that it's a waste of money, and now I'm going to be in trouble with my boss for, why did you waste money on this? It's probably going to set me back. However, if it's successful, then it might elevate me forward. So I'm not just making a purchasing decision on behalf of my company. I'm also making it on behalf of myself. So there's real emotion, my own emotion, and my own hopes and fears built into it. And I think that's where the best salespeople, they understand that. And they know that I'm not just selling to you or the purchasing committee. I'm selling to each of these individuals too. So I have to know what really motivates them individually, or what fears they have individually, so that I can overcome them.
John, regarding the connection building and in ways both salespeople and maybe independent entrepreneurs, consultants, coaches grow their community. Let's talk about podcast. Mm-hmm. About podcasting. So your podcast is called, tell me the name.
SalesPOP.
SalesPOP, right? Mm-hmm. And what is it about? And what are the benefits that you, in your view, were able to yield, from running this show?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we started SalesPOP, I think, in around 2018. So I think we've been doing it for about 7 years now. Oh. It's coming into our 7th year. When we started, it was focused pretty much 100% on sales. Now it's more like sales, marketing, leadership, entrepreneurialism, business. Sometimes we get into things, even like we did a whole series on mental health at one stage too, which is very relevant to salespeople anyway, because my goodness, does anybody else have a job where they get rejected more? I mean, they get told no more time. I mean, people sometimes overlook, that side of sales, that it's a tough job for people. You have to be, mental fortitude is very important. But we started it initially is that we wanted to just bring we're big believers in education, and we wanted to help salespeople be better and bring them good education. And then we thought, okay, we're pretty good at writing and creating content ourselves, and we would continue to do that. But there's all these people around the globe with great ideas and insights. So we thought, well, why not go and interview them? And so we started off and then looking for interesting people to interview and bring that content to the market. And then over time, it began to grow, and we reached the point. I mean, today, Sergey, to be honest, we don't outreach to anybody. It's people come to us, podcast booking agencies come to us. We have more people to interview than we possibly can manage at any one time, to be perfectly honest. But what I like about it, and the benefit of it, is it builds you a community, because you interview all of these people, so it builds a community. It allows them to bring their ideas to your audience.
That's number 2, right?
Yeah. it allows you then to build a body of content as well.
Absolutely.
Because let's face it, if I interview 10 different people about leadership, right, I now have 10 different perspectives. If I pull out the ideas of different people, I have now wonderful content coming from 10 different sources. I take the best idea out of everybody. So it generates fantastic content. I think another one, I think it's very, if you do it properly and you do it long enough and you produce a quality product at the end, I think it enhances your brand and your reputation. I know now, and I'll just give you a small example, Sergey.
Give an example, and also tell me when have you really noticed that it started reshaping your brand or brand started increasing brand awareness? Because a lot of podcasters, they kind of lose faith, when there is no traction. So when did it happen for you?
Well, in many ways, it's still happening because it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But what I would always say to people, and this is, I'm glad you raised this because I get asked a lot often, and sometimes people contact me and say, oh, I started a podcast, particularly during COVID, like lots of people decided to start podcasts. But, I started a podcast and, I did 20 episodes and, nobody.
Nothing is happening.
Yeah, nothing's happening. And I say, yeah. And they go, well, what I say, and I say, try doing 200. And they were like, wow, that's a lot of investment. But it's almost like, and then, we've done nearly, I think, 1,700 at this stage, or maybe 1,800. I can't remember. I lose count. But my point being, it's like podcasting is like anything else. It's not an overnight thing, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. And I think people have these unrealistic expectations because they'll see a podcast from a celebrity or they'll see Joe Rogan and they'll say, look, he got millions of views. And you're going, yes, he's a celebrity. He's got a name. And well, Joe Rogan built that he was the first one there. But you see these other people and you think they've already got a brand. This is an extension of their brand. You don't have a brand. You're trying to build one. And the only way you're going to build one is to produce quality content over a long period of time. So if you're not prepared to do it for the long haul, then I would say don't do it. If you're going to give up after 10 or 20 or after 50, you're going to say, I'm still only getting 10 views. Well, number one, I think you're looking at it the wrong way because you should be looking at that as content you can use on LinkedIn. You can maybe use for blog posts, you can use to create white papers. You can use that content in multiple different ways. And that's what you should be looking at. But you should be also asking yourself, am I improving? Yeah. Am I getting better as a podcaster? If I watch my own podcast, is there a good reason why somebody else should want to watch it? I think that's another part, Sergey. I think sometimes people start podcasts and they again, they're looking at these metrics and, they're saying, oh, the views or whatever, instead of going, I've just started this. I didn't go to college to be a podcaster. Why am I assuming I'm a good podcaster? Have you watched other podcasts? Have you watched your own podcast back? Have you gone, okay, I can improve on this? And what I always encourage people, Sergey, is have you gone on other people's podcasts? Yep. Because until you go on other people's podcasts as a guest, you can't understand the experience that your guest is having. So I would say you have to go into it with the attitude of it's a long-term investment of your time and energy, maybe some money. If you're not prepared to do it for the long haul, you're not prepared to say it's going to take me a year or two to even get established, even at a very base level, then don't do it. Go find some other, this isn't one of those things where you can, follow these 3 steps and overnight you're going to have thousands of views. No, it's not one of those things. And if you don't have the patience and I would say if you don't have the patience or the will to do it over the long term, that should tell you that it's not for you anyway. You're just looking
I believe in the compound effect. And I think Chris Williamson with Modern Wisdom podcast, Stephen Bartlett with The Diary of the CEO, they both said that there were like for 2 to 3 years where like pretty much no one gave a damn, you know, and then everything exploded. So, but they just kept consistently publishing new episodes. So I think the underlying factor here, in addition to what you eloquently outlined, is the love for this type of work in general, right? I think we both will love connecting, communicating. We know that we might be wrong somewhere. We're open to constructive criticism. We're open to opinions that do not coincide with others. So it's also somewhat maturity that plays the role in you being able to love the process.
Yeah, that's really well put, Sergey. Really, really well put. But yeah, you have to enjoy it. You have to get something out of it. I always say that when some people sometimes go, "Oh, well, what would you describe yourself as, an expert in this?" and whatever, I say, no, I would describe myself as a seeker of wisdom. And what I like to do, and what I think about the podcast, is I learn from everybody I talk to. And that's why when somebody comes on my podcast, I'm not there to challenge their ideas. I mean, I'm not there to go, yes, but let me contradict you, or I don't agree with what you're saying. Is what I'm there to do is to give them an opportunity to talk about whatever they're talking about and to extract insights from them, and then ask searching questions so that they can give more value. But I say, I've learned so much, to be honest. I've learned so much from people over the years. And oftentimes I'll go like, if nobody else gets anything out of this, only me, well, that's okay, because I learned something new today. And I think it's valuable for the rest of the world. Hopefully other people will see that too. But I think you're 100% correct. I think you have to love the process. I think you have to love to learn. And I think you have to love to meet interesting people. I mean, the people I've interviewed, some of them are just, I sometimes come off the podcast, just sit there for a few moments, go, wow, what an interesting life, or what an interesting thing they're doing, or what a really interesting perspective they have. And it's very, very enriching. But I think you're right. It's, if you're just doing it going, okay, will this get me? How many views will this get me? You're going about it the wrong way. It's
a transactional approach, similar to what we discussed. We're building relationships. And when I tell people that, you can use podcasts as a vehicle for building like a business or even selling something, but you should never push it. I mean, the first thing is that your first job is to connect with people. And in the interest of full disclosure, I must say that I'm still learning how to just pull out the red carpet in front of my guests and let them shine. Because at times I get taken away and I start saying something for too long, and people are not there for me. However, we should not diminish our roles as hosts in this process, right?
No, we should never diminish, and it is a learning experience. And I think the greatest compliment you can get is when you finish a podcast and the other person goes, "Wow, you're a great interviewer," or "Those were really great questions," or "Wow, I wasn't expecting that question. That was really good." Because people appreciate that, because nobody wants to have this thing where you've sent me 5 questions and I'm going, Sergey, tell me about this, and then I wait 5 minutes while you answer, and then I go, and then this. I mean, they want to. How I always describe it is, I describe it as a conversation between two people, right? And it's like if you're sitting on a bus or you're sitting on a plane and you happen to be behind these two people and you're eavesdropping on a really fascinating conversation. And that's what I feel like a good podcast is. It's a conversation between two people, one person just trying to provide the opportunity, asking good questions so the other person can talk about whatever their subject is. And the listener, you're there going, wow, this is really cool. This is interesting. And I think that makes for the best podcast.
And to follow up on this, I run a video production agency, and we specifically work with podcasts. And my biggest customer is Chat and Cheese podcasts, that are one of the biggest podcasts in HR industry, in TA industry in America. And their concept was like, what would it like to overhear two guys talking in a bar who are drinking? And every single times when we're working or when I'm watching the final product, I actually see a lot of times, first of all, one of them is drinking because they have time difference. One usually is in Europe, the second one is in America, right? So the one that in Europe, Chad, shout out to you, my man, is already drinking some beer at 6 p.m. or something.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, it's like no limitations. They do use some 18 plus language, but I mean that all makes for the great podcast. And I'm totally on board that we should not try to make or try to do it to make it too robotic. Just not overthinking and be yourself. That's the name of the podcast.
And I think it's a great name to. But I think that's an important point that you raised is about being yourself and deciding on your podcast, right? For instance, you're saying maybe they use some choice language on that one, right? I keep mine completely clean, and I say to people, we don't, and it's just because I started out that way, and that's the way I wanted to do it, and therefore it's a choice. It's just a choice. It's not anything else. But I'm also say to people is don't create a podcast persona. Right. Don't create a personality that you don't have.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Be yourself. Absolutely.
Exactly. Be yourself. But I have seen people, Sergey, who try to be funny when they're not funny, right? If you're not a naturally funny person, not everybody is, then don't. Because something, there is a role for people who are serious, who are analytical. They can be, that can be what some people are looking for. So I would say, don't try to be somebody else. Don't suddenly go when the light comes on, suddenly don't go, hey, I'm now Mr. Podcast Guy. Just be yourself.
Cool. Well said. Man, I'm also super excited to know that you wrote 2 books, not one, but 2. And writing a book is something that I have in my wish list, and before I die thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell me shortly, how did it happen for you? Was it sort of like writing a dissertation, just putting out all of your existing knowledge and you didn't give too much of a thought to it? Or was it a really conscious, mature decision to write a book?
Yeah. Well, it was a very conscious decision because I was working, I was CEO at Huthwaite at the time, and McGraw-Hill was the publisher of Spin Selling and that. And how the first book came about actually was, and this is an interesting one for people out there, just like podcasting and bloggers. It came from a blog post. I wrote this blog post for salespeople about when you are stuck, when you're not closing any business, every deal is going south. I said, sometimes you just need one small victory. And I used the example of George Washington, and it was during the American Revolution, the American Continental Army had been defeated many times. There were sickness. They were running short of people. What most people don't know is a lot of the people had signed up on contracts, I'll fight for 6 months and then I'm going back to my farm. So a lot of those people were coming up at the end of their contract, and it was looking pretty desperate, and it was looking like the revolution was going to collapse. And then Washington decided to say, okay, it was in the middle of winter. We're going to get in boats. we're going to go across the Delaware River and we're going to attack where there were Hessian mercenaries were holed up for the winter, right? So they weren't expecting anybody to attack in winter, and especially not across the river. So his men, they jumped in the boats and he led them across the Delaware. They surprised the Hessians, defeated them, and that victory then ignited the U.S. side, and people were, well, they weren't the U.S. at that stage, but the revolutionaries. And after that, then the war turned in their favor because more people joined, and but it was just that one small, just grabbing that one small victory. So anyway, that was the blog post. And then we took it to McGraw-Hill and said, would this be interesting? Do you think there's a book here where we could use analogies like this?
Wow.
And
so
they said,
actually just pitched an ideal blog post.
Yeah. And they said, "Oh, that's an interesting." And they said, "Yeah." So so then myself and a researcher and stuff, and then we actually hired somebody to do cartoons. So every chapter has a cartoon at the beginning that kind of illustrates the battle, like funny cartoons. They're good, but yeah, it literally came from a blog post, and then pitching an idea to say, "Do you think there's a book in this? If we did this." If we did many different sales lessons using the analogies of battles and history, and they said, yeah. So,
but nothing of this would be possible without you being employed where you were being employed, and B, not having this publisher as a connection, right?
Yeah. It would have been a lot harder. However, Today, the landscape is very different. I mean, today, people still want to be published by, well-known publishers, but they don't understand either. The reality of it is, number one, most publishers, most business books, especially if it's a business book or whatever, literally sell about 3,000 copies if they're lucky in their lifetime.
Ooh, tough truth.
So when a publisher publishes for you, they're expecting you to sell the book, right? So they're expecting you to go out and sell the book. They're not going to put, unless you're a well-known author, unless it's something wow, that's completely wow, and you've got a reputation, will they put money behind it? So I think people have a misconception of even if you land a well-known publisher, it doesn't guarantee you success, and they're not going to invest a ton of money in you. There are lots of different options these days. There's a lot of self-publishing options, or hybrid publishing options, or people who will help bring your book to market. So there's a lot more options today. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to do a book, Sergey, do a book because you want to do a book, and do a book that you're proud of. And if you're the only person who ever reads it or whatever, be fine with that, because if you take that attitude, then you'll probably do well with it.
So grateful for this piece of advice. Yeah, because that's something worthy. I'm not saying that other things in life are worthless, but I mean, to write a book is a great thing to have on your bio.
And by the way, there's also one other piece of advice I would say is that it's write blog posts or write.
I do have a blog,
right?
And we should never forget that if we do have the skill of writing, we need to practice it, right? Never put it on the shelf. Mm-hmm.
But maybe someday, if you look back at all your blog posts, maybe you actually have the bones of a book. If you took all those blog posts, maybe if you updated them, maybe if you rearranged them differently, changed some of them, you may already have a lot of content that could be, the basis for a book. That's another great way of doing it too.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you journal or just write down your ideas or whatever over time.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, and then like say, there's a book in there, but there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to start with a blank piece of paper.
John, as we're wrapping up, my final question for you will be a philosophical one. Get ready.
Yeah.
What's more important, the path or the destination for you personally?
Oh, I would say the path is far more important because I always say to people, and that's why I would say to people, like, obviously life's a journey, and we're always looking for destinations, but mostly what we find is a path that leads to another path that leads to another path that may lead to a destination. So I think you've got to enjoy the journey, as frustrating as it can be at times. And you've also got to be prepared when you hit those forks in the road, where the path where you can go this way or that way is to just, go with your gut instinct and take a chance. What's the worst thing you can happen, that you have to double back and walk backwards and take the other path? It doesn't matter. I think it's the path is the most important thing. And I wouldn't have had half the experiences I've had today if I hadn't just decided to, let the journey unfold, if you like. Because as we said at the beginning, I envy those people who had it all thought out, wanted to be a lawyer or whatever, and went on and did steps through 1 through 10 and became lawyer. Fantastic. If that's you, I mean, I envy you. If that's not you, then just embrace opportunities as they come.
That was John Golden, everybody. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Sergey. Fantastic.
You're looking for a quality video production provider? Look no further. My name is Sergey and I own Beverly Production. We are a video production agency from Ukraine. We help entrepreneurs to create credible online, offline podcasts and clips that drive interest, to promote your podcast. As a podcaster myself, I early realized that there are not that many podcasts that put an emphasis on quality and creativity, just making your videos look really, really cool. That's why we mix our videos up with different visual aids, sound effects, flashy transitions. We do dynamic switching and other cool creative things that just set apart your podcast from your competition. You can check our samples on the website, and we also help people to post the videos. So we take over YouTube management, and we can also run TikTok and LinkedIn for you. So if you're interested in something of this kind, don't hesitate to book a call with me. The contacts are available on the website. Thanks a lot.